should we go?
Okay.
We have the quorum, and I call this meeting to order, and we are meeting in public. Before I introduce the Honorable Minister and the special guests with us today, we have two honorable members that are on this committee. Mr. Pierre Pauls, welcome to the committee, and Mr. Chandra Arya, welcome to the committee as well. Beside this, we have a technical support, Jean-Francois, welcome, and thank you for being a technical support here as well. Welcome to meeting number 90 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. Today, for a briefing on migrant trafficking and smuggling, we have with us the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, Honorable Mark Miller, along with the officials. From the Canada Border Agency, we have Mr. Daniel Anson, welcome. And from the Department of Citizenship and Immigration, Mr. Scott Harris, Associate Deputy Minister, and Madam Michelle Kingsley, Assistant Deputy Minister, Economic, Family and Social Immigration. From the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, we have Chief Superintendent Richard Burchell, who's the Acting Assistant Commissioner, Federal Policing Criminal Operations. Welcome, Minister and the officials. And Mr. Miller will present for the first full hour, with the officials going for the second hour. With this, Minister Miller, go ahead with your opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will begin by acknowledging our presence on the traditional and unceded territories of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. J'ai ici aujourd'hui pour discuter d'un sujet que nous prenons très au sérieux, à savoir la protection des migrants vulnérables, comme la traite de personnes, le passage de clandestins et le crime organisé. IRCC...
Point d'ordre, Monsieur le Président. Sur le canal français, j'ai la traduction en anglais. Merci.
I'll suspend the meeting for a few seconds to make sure that the interpretation works.
Cela concerne M. Miller, nous allons reprendre au début. Je vais donc partir de minuteur. Allez-y, monsieur. Merci une fois de plus, Monsieur le Président. Je tiens à souligner que nous nous réunissons sur le territoire traditionnel lancédé du peuple algonquin Anishinaabe.
I'm here today to discuss a matter we take very seriously, that is the protection of vulnerable migrants against human trafficking, smuggling, and organized crime.
In both combating human trafficking and migrant smuggling, as well as protecting the rights and dignity of migrants who are either entering or are already in Canada. Our top priority is to maintain the integrity of our programs, promote safe and regular migration, while also ensuring that we are humane and compassionate in our approach towards migrants. Les victimes peuvent entrer au Canada par un...
Victims may enter Canada through a number of routes, whether as international students, workers, caregivers, and visitors, or with a non-valid immigration status.
Évidemment qu'avec près de...
It should be noted that with nearly 110 million people displaced globally, the world is facing a global migration crisis, and Canada is not alone.
My device is also not working. There's no
translation. Okay, hold on,
Apologize,
please.
but it's...
We have to suspend for a few more seconds to make sure everything works fine. the new interpreter has to get familiar with the system. Otherwise, the system is working fine. If any issues, please do raise your hand, and we'll accommodate. With this, Minister, please continue.
Présumé que c'était les deux derniers paragraphes qui n'étaient pas.
I think it was the last two paragraphs that weren't properly interpreted.
You want Minister to start from the beginning?
Well, no, I'm sorry. Even after the minister started the second round, there's still no sound coming through.
Is it?
Well, maybe my device is broken. I don't know.
Oh,
Maybe I'll try this one.
I'm hearing okay, Madam Khan.
Like it's not.
I'm going to suspend the meeting and make sure that Madam Khan's. Could you? Could the interpreters please say something so as we can make sure?
This is the English channel. Are you getting the interpretation? Are we getting the sound properly?
It's not working.
Okay, no problem.
This,
Okay, so with this, Minister, I'm so sorry that we have to give you an opportunity to repeat, and I would really appreciate if you can start from the beginning. Thank you. Yeah, from the top, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I want to begin by acknowledging our presence on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. J'ai aujourd'hui pour discuter d'un sujet que nous prenons très au.
I'm here today to discuss a matter we take very seriously, that is the protection of vulnerable migrants against human trafficking, smuggling, and organized crime.
Key role in both combating human trafficking and migrant smuggling, as well as protecting the rights and dignity of migrants who are either entering or already in Canada. Our top priority is to maintain the integrity of our programs, promote safe and regular migration, while also ensuring that we are humane and compassionate in our approach towards migrants. Les victimes peuvent entrer au Canada pour un certain.
Victims may enter Canada through a number of routes, whether as international students, workers, caregivers, and visitors, or with a non-valid immigration status. It should be noted that with nearly 110 million people displaced globally, the world is facing a global migration crisis, and Canada is not alone in feeling its impacts. In particular, we are seeing unprecedented levels of migration and forced displacement from the Americas.
Always been and will always remain in preserving the integrity of our immigration system, while also ensuring that we are fair and compassionate to those fleeing persecution. Nous poursuivons notre travail avec des partenaires mondiaux en vue de.
We continue to work with our global partners to promote safe and regular pathways of migration, which includes our commitment to welcome 15,000 people from the Americas.
To combat human trafficking, my department also works with national and international partners to detect traffickers and offer programs and support for victims, importantly. Our continued efforts are vital to ensure that Canada eliminates criminal organizations that are taking advantage of vulnerable migrants. Statistics Canada reports that 96% of human trafficking victims are women and girls. Of those, nearly 70% are under the age of 25, with sexual exploitation cited as a common motivator for traffickers. We can't look the other way on these atrocious acts. Grâce au rapport de police, nous savons qu'environ 30% des cas de traite de.
Based on police reporting, we know that approximately 30% of human trafficking incidents are related to immigration. One incident is too many. Our immigration officers work in partnership with the Canada Border Services Agency and the RCMP to combat this.
Étant donné que les enquêtes policières et les poursuites peuvent prendre beaucoup de temps, Nos agents d'immigration peuvent fournir du soutien immédiat s'ils croient qu'une personne est victime d'activités de passage de clandestins ou de traite des personnes.
Interpreters on the English channel. Okay. Should we go ahead? Okay, Minister, please go ahead.
De plus, nous utilisons notre stratégie.
As well, since police investigations and prosecutions can take considerable amounts of time, our immigration officers can provide immediate support if they believe an individual is a victim of smuggling or human trafficking. In addition, we use our whole-of-government strategy to disrupt migrant smuggling against attempts destined for Canada by land. We will continue to work with domestic law enforcement agencies and international partners.
Measures in place to help connect victims to the services that they need. IRCC may issue temporary resident permits to out-of-status human trafficking victims so that they can access physical and mental health services and prescription drug coverages through the interim federal health program. These temporary residence permits also allow them to apply for work and study permits at the same time, and we waive some processing fees. Workers on employer-specific work permits who experience abuse from their employer are also eligible to apply for an open work permit for vulnerable workers. This has helped them leave abusive situations without jeopardizing their ability to continue working in Canada if applicable. Between 2015 and 2023, IRCC issued 906 temporary resident permits to foreign national victims of human trafficking and their dependents. In addition, between July of 2019 and December of 2023, we issued 4,857 open work permits for vulnerable workers. Parmi les autres mesures que nous avons collectées,
Another measure we've collectively taken is the Canadian Human Trafficking Hotline. This hotline is available 24/7 and in 200 languages, including 27 Indigenous language, to receive reports of suspected cases of human trafficking and connects victims to community supports.
all of the tools at our disposal to curb these heinous crimes and ensure the safety of vulnerable migrants. Thank you, and I will now take your questions.
Thank you, Minister. Before I give the time to the honourable members, if you think Minister is going too long on the answer, instead of interrupting him, if you can raise your hand, then I will make sure that your time is respected, and I will acknowledge you or the Minister. So instead of crosstalk, that will work well. With that, we will go with the first round, and with the first round, we will go to Honourable Member Pauls for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour, Monsieur le Ministre, Monsieur, Madame.
Thank you, Chair.
Monsieur le Ministre, concernant
My first question has to do with visas. In 2009, the Conservative government had a policy for visas to Canada because we were having problems with the criminal nature of some of the people coming in. So that's when we imposed the necessity of having visas. At the time, I was a spokesperson because we realized we were having problems. And we've had problems continuously. Can you tell us why this is? I don't know if it was a bad decision at the time. We had visas or some with our major economic partners, and this led to problems with the easy flow of merchandise and persons. I would also note that things like the fact that Mexicans who came here, that it was all right, but there were some people who were coming in immigration who were not acceptable. Well, I know that for trade talks, this is something that was discussed, but in 2009, what about the criminality of some of the claimants, some of the people who wanted visas? These are people who are infiltrating Canada. They have gangs, criminal gangs. Now, some people also weren't Mexican but had fake Mexican passports and were able to get into Canada. Do you not think we should have stricter measures in place? I wouldn't associate all flows of these people with criminality. Well, that wasn't my question, Minister. With respect to the diplomatic process, which is now underway, we met recently with the ambassador of Mexico. That was 2 days ago. We have excellent relations. But any decision, we will not be announcing any decisions ahead of time that might lead to problems for people who want to communicate with us if something happens. Thank you, Mr. Minister. It's quite possible that people will take further decisions. You also announced, Mr. Minister, that there were positive things happening. But at the present time, even in my MP's office, I hear that the immigration system does have issues. And there's a big difference between what we're hearing and the immigration we're seeing in Montreal. There was a letter with very clear bullet points. I did an interview in 2009 where we were discussing gangs. What are you doing concretely in the short term to deal with this problem? Well, in order to fight crime, we have our border services, CSBA, and it's clear that in Mr. Legault's letter, where he discussed his concerns, well, within the framework of our diplomatic relationships with Canada, we want to see if we can do something. If we do something too quickly, we have to have, Mexico has to have the ability to react to all this. Well, if we go back to 2016, I know you're talking about trade interests, economic interests, but the reason these rules were put in place were clear. Now today, after the fact, you think that your policy was wrong. No, because we were dealing with great flows of immigrants, and I said earlier in committee that there are the people who want to come to Canada are coming in historic numbers. There are people who are claiming asylum. But what is happening is what you're talking about is a relatively recent development. Just to finish, the letter from the Premier of Quebec, do you think what he's asking for is reasonable? Well, not only reasonable.
I'm done. Yeah.
Done. Thank you. And now we will move to Mr. Ali for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair, thank you, Minister and officials, for appearing before the committee. In November 2023, I was with the Minister of Diversity, Inclusion, and Person with Disabilities, Kamal Khera, as she announced funding for $7 million for the region of Peel towards opening a new reception center for asylum seekers. This funding is absolutely crucial for the region of Peel and the city of Brampton, and to ensure that asylum seekers have a safe and warm place to sleep at night. It has and will save lives. The Mayor of Brampton, Patrick Brown, even went as far as to say, I quote, "Credit where credit is due. The government of Canada stepped up," end quote. Minister, Could you please tell us tell the committee how the federal government has been providing funding to the region of Peel and other provinces and municipalities across the country to support the housing needs of asylum seekers?
Honorable Minister.
Thanks, MPL. The announcement that we made, and you were at, and thank you, obviously, for your advocacy and your colleagues in this, because it was directly responsible for swift action by the federal government, was very important, because this is a humanitarian operation. Whether you agree with whether people that arrive here regularly should be here or not, clearly they need a shelter over their head for the winter, but also as they obtain due process that they're entitled to under the laws of this country and our international obligations. The relationships that we have are different from province to province. We have a different relationship with Quebec, and frankly, it's, despite the political narrative, at times it is more organized than what we have with the government of Ontario. We deal sort of by city by city, municipality by municipality at times in our organization, and there probably is a good argument to be better organized, particularly as we see large flows coming into the city of Toronto, a lot of them coming from other places of the country, including Quebec. These announcements will save lives. The interim housing program that its name betrays it is something that is interim, but it is intended to keep shelters over people's heads. We are operating federally as well, numbers of hotels across the country to make sure that people are safe. They can have work permits and get jobs, but it isn't ideal, and I don't think anyone credible could tell you that this is the long-term solution to the challenges that we face. But I think it is one that Canadians want to see us rise to, particularly as it involves not only the federal government, but municipal governments, including the mayoralties of Brampton and Mississauga, and importantly, given the volume, the mayoralty of Toronto. We're not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination, but the sums that we've deployed federally and those that we will leverage provincially and municipally are key in making sure that these people, who are amongst the most vulnerable people in Canada, are properly taken care of, housed as they get the due process that they are entitled to.
Thank you, Minister. As you know, the Minister's mandate letter asks the Minister to build on existing pilot programs to further explore ways of regularizing status for undocumented workers who are contributing to Canadian communities. Can you expand on the pilot programs and other initiatives that IRCC has developed to regularize individuals without status?
Honorable Minister.
And it is important to underscore how vulnerable people without status are. We are looking at a number of options. One more broad one that I am scheduled to take to Cabinet this spring sitting, dealing with the regularization of people that are here without status. It will not be as comprehensive and as broad-reaching as many people want, but I think it'll be something that will be fair for people that have been treated very unfairly, that are here, that are working, their kids are they perhaps have kids that are Canadians and should be Canadian by any other name and are not. So that's something, whether it succeeds or fails, I have given the mandate by the Prime Minister, and I've undertaken to take before Cabinet for discussion and eventually debate by the House if we choose to move towards a legislative path. I would also add that we are also looking in other areas, such as the construction industry, and looking at pathways towards permanent residency and extending some of the pilots we have for out-of-status construction workers that are here. They are not a pressure on housing, and they could really contribute to an industry that has historically been underrepresented by immigrants. So a couple of lines where we are working on, but always open to more innovative ones if Canadians want it.
Great, thank you.
You have 45 seconds.
Quickly, as you know, whenever you come or officials come, I like to ask on the updates on the visa processing center in Islamabad. I had asked from Deputy Minister last time she was here, and I was told, the committee was told that it's in the visas for officials are in process. So could you please update the committee on that, where we at, please?
Honorable Minister.
So pleased to confirm that, Shefkat. we do have about 7 positions that should be in place by summer of this year. This is a process of accreditation with the government of Pakistan that is underway, but it is good news, and it'll allow us to have a more streamlined on-the-ground processing capacity in Islamabad.
Thank you, Mr. Ali, and we'll go to my dear friend, Brunel Deseb. I know you get excited when French speaker minister comes in. I'm going to give the floor to you, my dear friend. Go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Ministre, toujours.
Thank you, Chair. And Minister, it's a pleasure to see you before our committee. Minister, I'd like to talk about some of the things you said. You said in the House that the leader of the Bloc Québécois was saying that migrants were treated badly or sometimes could be treated badly. You were saying that Quebecers were backseat drivers. Now, when you talked about such a substantial issue as immigration, was this the right thing to say? Thank you, Mr. Duceppe. In our discussions on immigration generally, we need to have a calm, rational debate. With all due respect, my feeling was that your leader, when he said this about our $100 million deal with Quebec, and then to compare this announcement to social housing, well, to my mind, this lacked respect. I know that sometimes things get heated in debates in the House. You know, sometimes it's like a hockey game. So I don't want to be lacking in respect, but we work with the Quebec government. And between these two levels of government, well, as a member, we owe you answers. We have to be accountable. That's clear. Thank you, Mr. Minister. Well, what I take from this is that Liberals were in opposition for 10 years under Harper, and so you think Quebecers were simply Monday morning quarterbacks, backseat drivers. Yes or no? Well, the Liberal government, well, when you were in opposition, sir, no, well, this is not necessarily the case with the Bloc Québécois, but we have members all over Canada, according to my last findings. Well, Mr. Minister, you know there are areas of the world where there is no accountability. Mr. Brunel Duceppe, sir.
Merci.
If you can come through the chair, I would really appreciate because,
Monsieur le Président, à travers
it's
vous.
very hard on the interpreters.
Merci,
right?
excusez-moi la gang.
Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. À travers vous, est-ce que l'opposition a un rôle à jouer au Canada? Est-ce que c'est seulement des gérants d'estrade?
Vous avez tout à fait un rôle important, mais il faut l'assumer quand même, le rôle. Et puis, sur ce point, je pense qu'on dérape du point de notre comité.
Parfait. Non, c'est parce qu'à un moment donné, il faut... Merci, Monsieur le Président. Il faut remettre les
One
pendules à l'heure.
Mr. Brunel.
Monsieur Brunel Duceppe,
Oh, Jesus.
l'interprétation ne fonctionne.
English channel here. English channel. Well, yes.
Allez-y.
Let's set things straight, because you called a member of the opposition a Sunday or Monday morning quarterback. And that's perhaps not the right thing to say in this great country called Canada. Well, in your relationship with Minister Fréchette, you said you had good relationship and good communications, but Mr. Fréchette was exasperated and said that we might be a good idea to have a referendum so that Quebec could repatriate all its powers.
Honorable ministre.
Dire ce qu'elle veut, évidemment.
She has a right to say what she wishes to say. We talk, we text each other, but I don't think the Parti Québécois expects us to be in agreement with everything or any other minister. we have different responsibilities. Well, there were media who said that there were comments made by a Mexican ambassador having to do with the implementation of joint measures to deal with the present migratory flow. Now, how were these measures decided? Why does the Mexican foreign minister, why did he bring this up? I'd like to know what happened there. Well, that's a matter of interpretation. The Prime Minister has been in contact with the President of Mexico, and the Mexican President said yes, that they would be bringing in measures. Given the importance of our diplomatic relationships, I would say that for the moment we haven't seen the effects of all this. Although there is seasonal variation. Thank you, Chair.
Votre temps est presque écoulé, mais je vais vous accorder une question.
Positivement la demande du gouvernement du Québec de remettre en place les visas pour les Mexicains.
C'est à voir.
Merci, Monsieur le ministre.
Thank you. And now we will go to Madam Kwan. Madam Kwan, for 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister and the officials for coming before the committee. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. The government, of course, with the Safe Third Country Agreement, secretly signed an agreement with the United States and then later on announced it. But part of that announcement came with a commitment of a 15,000 migrants to be accepted from Central and South America, and that they would come through regular channels between 23-24. Can the Minister advise how many have actually come through to date through those commitments?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, MP Kwan. A couple clarifications on that. There was a portion that was undertaken that a part of that would also be the excess number year over year that we have with respect to temporary foreign workers. That has been achieved. It's in the ballpark of about 4,000 people. We also have a number. I would say that the envelope is now fully subscribed, and then the next steps in the next process is to land those people. So that's something that we believe confidently will happen over the coming months.
Sorry, when the Minister says that they're fully subscribed, I'm talking about specifically the 15,000 that was committed. So is that 15,000 fully subscribed?
Yes.
And 4,000 have arrived?
Correct, at least.
Okay, and could the Minister also provide a breakdown of the demographics of those migrants in terms of where they're from?
From which countries?
Yeah.
To the best of my knowledge, and we can confirm with officials, that it is, I would say, predominantly from Colombia. There is, after that, a second significant portion from Haiti, and a less significant one from Venezuela. We can, Jenny, we can get you the percentages if you want.
Yes, maybe along with the actual numbers, that would be useful as well. Thank you for that, Minister. So then those numbers are fully subscribed. And when do you expect the arrivals of these individuals?
It can vary, but we expect significant, steady flows over the coming months.
Okay, that's about as vague as you can get. All right, I will move on. In terms of the issue around human trafficking and the concern with respect to that, from the department information, both through IRCC and presumably working in collaboration with your colleagues from public safety, how many people have you identified to have been victims of human trafficking from Mexico?
Maybe perhaps
Mr. Anson, go ahead.
Mr. Anson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The way that our reporting works, we don't necessarily have, or I don't have the statistics on the amount of victims. I can tell you right now that we have, specific to human trafficking, we have 27 active criminal investigations, Obviously, it continues to compile over the number of the years because the complexity of human trafficking cases tend to take multiple years, so we don't have easily defined statistics. We also refer, as a matter of standard procedure, all trafficking investigations to the RCMP with some exceptional circumstances. So, and specific to human smuggling, we also have 171 active cases. But our systems don't necessarily identify the statistics on the amount of victims. I couldn't be able to answer that today. Apologies, Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you for that. Is challenging then to say active cases, but then you can't really say how many victims are engaged in that process. I think it would be useful to know of those cases how many victims. Perhaps that's a figure that could be looked. That's a process that could be looked into by the department and supply that information to the committee subsequently. Now, with respect to migrants who are subject to exploitation, and some would say that that is a form of human trafficking because they come here with the promise of employment and pay and so on, and yet they don't actually receive that treatment. They're mistreated and they're subject to abuse. So from the Immigration Department's information, how many victims of vulnerable workers, migrant workers, have been found are from Mexico?
I wouldn't have the geographical breakdown of that in Piquan. We could probably provide it at a subsequent date.
Well, I think it'd be useful to have that, seeing as this specific study, the motion here is to talk about Mexico. I think it would be useful to have that information. We know that migrants often, migrant workers, temporary foreign workers with a close work permit are subject to abuse, and this is an ongoing issue that I know the minister is aware of and the committee is as well. And so from that perspective, you know, there's been ongoing reports. A recent report in Ontario, I think some 67 migrant workers were subject to abuse in that regard, but they are not, it's not the only example. There are many to which I won't bother citing all of them. Now, you know, many people have said over and over again, the reality is that when people are subject to a close work permit environment, they are actually in a severe disadvantage and subject to exploitation. I know that there's a system where people can report themselves and go through the ministry to apply for an open work permit as a vulnerable worker. Will the minister consider providing open work permit to people from the beginning so that they're not having to face exploitation and then to seek a recourse, to be more proactive and preemptive in the face of this ongoing situation?
Thank you. The minister, we are already 15 seconds over. Can we please?
It's something we're definitely looking into. You know, obviously we want to deal with the exploitation as it occurs regardless of the conditions that people in, but it is clear that when you have a closed work permit, it does make you more vulnerable and it makes you more hesitant to report abuse and take action, and it gives you less of the ability to move from one place to another. Looking at the next policy options that we have on our in our toolkit is something that both I and Minister Boissonneau are looking at intensely, and I think it's something we will be working to fix in the coming months.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Madam Kwan. We will go to Honourable Member Mr. Kimmich for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, when you assumed your role as Minister of Immigration in August 2023, were you briefed on the surging number of asylum claims being made at airports in Canada?
Honourable Minister.
Yes.
Honourable Member.
So when did you receive those briefings? In August?
I couldn't tell you precisely what date. I became the minister in July. It was the briefings occur, I would venture to think, within the next week, and then we follow up on more detailed subjects.
So you would have seen that the numbers were 250 asylum claims were made by Mexican nationals in 2016. The visa requirement was lifted, and the numbers I have shows that just for Mexican nationals at the air border was 14,490 as of September. So why haven't you acted on that?
Honourable Minister.
Again, as I was telling your colleagues, MP Kimmich, this takes a process both internally as well as with the government of Mexico, which is one of our most important commercial partners, trading partners, and it isn't a decision that is taken lightly. The commercial flows that go between our countries are much more significant than they were in 2015. I think that's important. Tourism is a multi-billion-dollar
Minister,
industry,
I
but
understand.
there are
These all
valid
fair
public
points,
policy
Minister.
reasons for it. I think you'll admit.
2022 to 2023, CBC calculated the numbers. That's a 46% increase in asylum claims being made at an airport, which means it's a person that applied for an ETA and they landed here. 11%, according to the IRB, follow through and they're accepted, which means that 89% of the claims made so far have been rejected as false asylum claims.
So
I'm asking you just what have you done since then? You see these numbers, you've been briefed on it. Why haven't you acted?
So again, this is not an issue that is limited to Mexico. That 11% that you are citing is erroneous. It is closer to 30. It would be very important to correct that record, and we can give you all the information in order to correct that. It is much lower than
Will you provide it to this committee?
Absolutely. It is much lower than the acceptance rates that we see at the Immigration Refugee Board with respect to other asylum seekers, and undoubtedly the volumes are disconcerting when it comes to the people coming in from Mexico. I would also add one qualification that the claims made at the airport are probably understating the number of people coming to the airport, because there are people that come here and then spend 14 days or more and then make the claim afterwards, and they are not necessarily, to the best of my understanding, it's tabulating that. But I don't want to underplay the severity of the issue.
For the 14,000, I want to remind you, in 2016, the government put out a news release. It's directly on the Prime Minister's website. In it, it refers to the visa requirement being lifted. It then goes on to say in one of the paragraphs, closer collaboration between Canada and Mexico on mobility issues will also help encourage travel between the two countries while preventing any increase in asylum claims or other irregular migration. That obviously hasn't happened. If the numbers went from 250 to well over 14,000 claims being made just in 1 year, and there's tens of thousands of claims at the IRB that have been made coming just from one original country. So it begs the question, why haven't you acted since August to reimpose on Mexican nationals the visa requirement? The second part of the question is, what were those prevention measures that were used between 2016 and 2024, and why haven't they worked?
Honourable Minister.
First and foremost, I think you'll agree with me that the fact that you haven't seen visa requirements not imposed doesn't mean that there hasn't been action taken, and that we are not seized with the severity of the issue. The colleagues to my left would live that on a daily basis. That's a different consideration. Clearly, there is a challenge. When it comes to asylum seekers generally, we're facing historic flows. We're not immune. Every country in the world that people want to go to is seeing massive amounts of people coming to it in an irregular fashion. You asked what action was taken. In December, I canceled a public policy with respect to certain visas that we had put in place after COVID to unblock a lot of the backlog. That policy was canceled, and so there are now stricter terms in place for visas generally, which should impact the aggregate number of asylum claims. But I do recognize that it is not directly related to our relationship with Mexico, which again is very important, and every decision has to be made in
Honourable member.
fashion.
So, Minister, the cancellation of policies that have to do with the COVID pandemic doesn't go back to 2016. There was no pandemic in 2016. I asked you two-part question. Why haven't you acted since August? And what were these measures that are still on the Prime Minister's website? Canada to lift visa requirements for Mexico, and it goes on. It says while preventing any increase in asylum claims. The government said that. It was 250. It's in the tens of thousands. And by the number you even admitted to now is 70% of them are being rejected. So why haven't you reimposed a visa requirement on Mexican nationals?
Again, it doesn't mean that we are not taking steps necessary to change that reality, but I'm not going to tell you in advance when it will occur, and I think as a responsible member of Parliament, you can appreciate precisely why.
Thank you, Mr. Kimich, and thank you, Honourable Minister. We will go to Mr. El Khoury for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Minister, to our committee, and also welcome to the officials here. Minister, I was truly happy to hear you announce that our government will put forward a sum of $100 million for Quebec in the framework of for housing. This will help Quebec welcome and have proper housing for asylum claimants. I believe that the minister announced that this funding goes in the right direction. Minister, can you tell us, can you explain for our committee with respect to our funding for Quebec for this? Can you explain how this works? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Alcouri. It's clear that in order to give assurances to the province of Quebec is doing more than its fair share with respect to welcoming asylum claimants. It has a more structured approach than other provinces, a better organized one. And it's clear that there are flows of immigrants between provinces, but the two most popular destinations are Quebec and Ontario. The money that we announced was $100 million for housing these people in Quebec, housing asylum claimants. This is in addition to another $50 million that we announced in another envelope, and another $70 million in yet another program. This was part of a program in 2017 when the government decided, when the federal government knew it had to deal with larger migratory flows. Now there might be other solutions now, because we want to sort of stop certain inflow at the border, but we're trying to help Quebec so it can continue to admit asylum claimants. And with respect to these claimants, there have been at least 10,000 of these claimants who have gone to other provinces. Now, there remains work to be done. We're not out of the woods yet. But if we can set aside political rhetoric, I think these people will be well sheltered. Over the last week, we've heard from many Quebecers saying that we should do more with respect to asylum claimants. They ask the federal government to help get funding to them in a temporary way. Now, there has been help from the federal government recently, but our government has done more than provide funding for certain people. Can you talk about other ways in which we can help Quebec while respecting the Canada-Quebec Accord? Well, for all of Canada, this envelope is a substantial one, especially for the city of Toronto and the cities around Toronto. Now, Toronto is a major pole of attraction for these. It's a magnet for many of these asylum claimants. It's not just Montreal, it's Toronto as well. Now, the Quebec-Canada Accord is very important. The idea behind the agreement what was that Quebec's demographic weight be respected, and it gives Quebec a great deal of authority in this matter. I'm sure there are other provinces which are jealous of the discretion that Quebec can exercise. And this, quite apart from the sums that have been dedicated to it in 2015 when we came to power, the money to Quebec, $300,000 perhaps to $500,000 crumbs. And I think it's important to give more money because immigration is increasing. So now they have this money, and
Mr. Brunel Desai for 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Ministre, dans une...
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Minister, there was an excellent investigation done for the program Enquête, and they talked about human smuggling and how it was controlled by Mexican cartels. Would you agree that this is directly linked? Do you think it's linked to the fact that Mexican visitors don't need visas to enter Canadian territory? Well, I have to enter the criminal mind. Yes, some criminals are taking advantage of the volume of people coming here and of their vulnerability. There are people who are abused and exploited. That's a fact. But whatever the reason for people being here, a determined person, whether it's a visa or a passport or not, can get here. Chief Superintendent Burchill, do you think the fact that visitors don't need visas to get here explains the fact that the cartels are more present on our territory?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I wouldn't necessarily draw the correlation that any immigration patterns are responsible for organized crime per se in this particular regard. What I would say is, as mentioned, these folks that are coming over are vulnerable. Organized criminals of all stripes, Mexican cartel included, will exploit that. The numbers are, they're not something that we track, whether it's the numbers of migrants or the numbers of investigations that we have. But what we can say is that organized crime writ large of all different stripes is involved in human trafficking and human smuggling. And we can say that in Canada, from our investigations across the country, that there is Mexican organized crime involved in this.
And
Déjà?
yes, 2.5 minutes. Thank you.
Il me restait pas une petite affaire parce que Madame.
Well, this is significant because Ms. Fréchette said she didn't feel there was any openness on the part of Minister Miller. So what would you say about this, Minister?
Otherwise, time is up.
Il va falloir que je lui parle directement. J'ai cette habilité, puis je vais pas...
Well, I can't really comment.
Madam Khan, go ahead, please. 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Minister, earlier in your response, you talked about the regularization program, which is about to go before Cabinet. In it, you spoke a little bit about the one of the categories, that being construction workers. Could you advise whether or not in this regularization scheme, is it only limited to certain categories of workers, such as construction workers, or would it be open to all workers?
No, and it's not based on working necessarily. That I was, we should really...
Sorry, apologies. When I say workers, I meant undocumented migrants.
No, I mean, look, what I hope to bring to Cabinet is something that is broad and comprehensive. What I was talking about separately was when we look at new public policies on temporary foreign workers that we bring in to fill the labor shortages in Canada, there are options for us to carve into those public options, those options, people that are here anyway that have fallen out of status, and to regularize them. In my mind, that's something that would be separate and discrete from a broader regularization process.
All right, just so I'm clear, that it would be actually on the regularization program would be open to all workers and not just to specific certain professions or occupations.
My thinking behind that, without betraying any Cabinet confidence, is that it would not be based on that theme. If there are certain categories of people that have fallen out of status, it would sort of be an ancillary approach to it. But I'm looking at something a little broader and more comprehensive.
Thank you. Just very quickly, I know I'm running out of time. With respect to individuals who are vulnerable workers, what is the, and for the people who are coming through the border applying for asylum, et cetera, what is the average processing time for them, for those who are from Mexico? How long are they waiting for their application to be processed to determine whether or not they have a valid asylum claim?
Yeah, I mean, look, two things. I think we do our best to get work permits in people's hands, but the processing can take 2 years.
Thank you very much. And is the process of providing open work permits to the claimants, what's the turnaround time for that, actually?
Honorable Minister, you have 10 seconds.
This what's the fact pattern? This is someone that has been exploited from a closed work permit into an open. You're saying issuing an open work permit?
No, I'm talking about people who have come into Canada and is making an asylum claim, and they are waiting for their claim to be processed by the IRB. In the meantime, they're provided a work permit. What's the turnaround time for them to get the work permit?
Thank you, and the time is up, Minister, and if you...
We strive for 30 to 60 days. It can be longer at times.
Thank you, and we'll move to Mr. Kmich now. Mr. Kmich, we'll go to you for 4 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So, Minister, reflecting on the answers you gave to me 10 minutes ago, in 2016, there were just over 200 asylum claims being made by Mexican nationals who arrived to Canada with a visa, and then that number has surged to in the tens of thousands as of last year, and at the air borders especially, the numbers are exponentially increasing. It's like a 2,000% increase. You couldn't provide me a single thing the government has done since 2016 when I asked you that question specifically. And last month or the month before, you said the immigration system was out of control. Is this an example of it being out of control?
Honorable Minister.
I've said quite clearly that the flows that are coming into the country, regardless of the country of origin, particularly in terms of asylum seekers and irregular migration, are very high. I think it's important to take a look at our public policies to see where we can tighten that up. That includes Mexico. When I talked about your specific reference was with respect, as you know well, to international students, which is a completely different category. Although within that core category, because of lax policies, particularly of provinces and designated learning institutes, you will find inland asylum claims from a number of those institutions.
So Minister, a few months ago also, the previous immigration minister, who's now the housing minister and is still kind of moonlighting as a senior immigration minister sometimes on the housing issue specifically, he said the situation was a mess, specifically talking about immigration to Canada. He said it's a mess. CTV Power Play, he's mentioned it, National Polls, printed it, Canadian Press. Do you agree with him then? And is the asylum situation in Canada, with the surging amount of claims specific to one country, is it a mess?
Honorable Minister.
You know, people that seek to come to Canada and get here, I would caution people on judging them. Clearly, the flows...
Are you saying Minister Fraser judged them?
Honorable Member, let Minister finish, and I'll make sure that I respect your time. Honorable Minister.
What I'm saying is that those flows are significant, and we have a job as a government in looking at the public measures that we have to tighten the screws. That will come in many forms, whether it's the announcement that I made with respect to international students, which will have a significant impact on volumes, whether it is any decision-making process that is currently underway with respect to Mexico. That is something that we are looking at. But clearly, we're not immune to the flows that we're seeing across the world, and you know well, because this is an area of interest to you. It's not something that Canada can escape completely. I think first and foremost, we have to have a humane and a humanitarian approach to it, but we do also have a job to do as a government.
So, Minister, you're deflecting because there's two of you now who are still commenting on immigration issues. You're the minister, and then the senior minister for immigration is commenting, calling it a mess. He's tying it to housing. He's blaming international students in some situations. There are provinces which are looking to the federal government and directing the fault at your ministry. And I would say at your government, because since 2016, there hasn't been any actions you've taken, even though there's a press release that's still lingering on the Prime Minister's website that you would prevent an increase in asylum claims or other irregular migration specific to the lifting of the visa on Mexican nationals. So you haven't done anything. So is Minister Fraser correct? Is it a mess? And are you responsible for that mess by not having done anything in the last 6 or so months to reimpose the visa requirement?
Honorable Minister.
You've gone from a very general observation to a particular question, but what I would say is I could point you to 2 measures that I took in the last few months alone that have moved to restore the integrity of the system.
Honorable Member, I'll give you 30 seconds to respect your time.
Well, it's not working, Minister, because the numbers are still increasing. So what else are you going to do? By what date are you going to reimpose the visa if things don't change?
Honorable Minister.
Again, you are a responsible member of Parliament. I will not be telling that to you or anyone else publicly.
And second, Honorable Member.
Chair, the Minister's obstructed. I'm asking a direct question on surging numbers, and he won't answer the question before a parliamentary committee.
Thank you. Honorable Minister, 5 seconds.
MP Tom Kmich asked me when and if I would reimpose a Mexican visa. I told him I wasn't going to tell him publicly, and I won't. It's not obstructing, it's answering the question.
The public has a right to know by which date
Sorry,
you
Mr.
actually
Kmich, we're going to go to Madam Jai for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for appearing before the committee. Minister, this last Friday on February 2nd, I had the honor to stand with our Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, as well as Mayor Olivia Chow, when the federal government announced $143 million through the Interim Housing Assistance Program to help Toronto provide housing for asylum seekers. This is a great news for the City of Toronto, and Mayor Olivia Chow said it herself at the announcement that the federal government has fully delivered for Toronto. So could you please explain the committee how this $143 million, which was announced for Toronto, deal with the surge in demand for shelter spaces and prevent asylum claimants from experiencing homelessness?
Honorable Minister.
The interim housing program is a very important tool in making sure, as the name betrays, people have a roof over their head. Toronto, like most, if not all cities, does have a balanced budget, and Mayor Chow has been quite responsible in saying that she has an obligation, just like her provincial counterparts, to help asylum seekers in a very humane, humanitarian way in their jurisdiction, and has taken that on her shoulders and the shoulders of the City of Toronto. The number that we announced that you attended at, Selma, builds on the $100 million that we announced earlier last year for the same thing. The City of Toronto has received hundreds of millions of dollars over the last little while to face an increasing flow of migrants that are coming to them, whether it's through Pearson or coming through Trudeau Airport, for that matter, or across the land borders and gravitating to where their community members are, or where they see the prospect of being able to get a job once a visa is issued. So that's the federal government's responsibility. We also give interim health benefits while there is due process undertaken with respect to the asylum claims. These housing initiatives are very important as well in terms of our ability to coordinate so that we can actually issue visas, track people, and be able to reduce processing times. If people are all over the place, it's very hard to find them if they change addresses. So there is an incidental effect over and above, obviously, the very humanitarian need to make sure people have a shelter.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair, Minister, in previous studies in our committee at CIMM, we have heard a lot of testimony about the open work permit for the vulnerable workers. So could you please go into more details about the purpose of that program and what are the features of the open work permit for vulnerable workers?
Honourable Minister.
So for vulnerable workers, and this can be done on an ad hoc basis, but there is a program to make sure that that they can get an open work permit so that they can leave the place where they are being exploited. It is a program that has it requires a number of parameters to be met, but it is one that is extremely important to making sure that we are stemming and preventing abuse and at least allowing people to be able to at times testify against their employers where in the context of being in a closed work permit, they would be disincentivized and in fact, at times, if they are truly being exploited and threatened with being sent home or fired. So it is extremely important. It's a program that makes sense, and it's a program that I believe needs to continue. It has had, I will admit, some challenges at times, but it's one that we will continue to refine to make sure that people in a vulnerable situation aren't exploited.
Thank you,
Minister.
On behalf of the committee members, Honorable Minister, thank you for being with us, and thank you for you being accessible to our committee, and looking forward seeing you soon here. Thank you, and we will suspend the meeting for a few seconds or minutes before we get the officials going. beginning another round of questions and answers with the officials. The hard stop is at 7:05. Mr. Arya?
I thought we are closing at 6:30. I have certain events starting.
No, it's not, because we have full 2 hours, and I'm going to 7:05. That is the decision that was made to make sure that minister and officials, we have 2 full hours. So we will continue now with the meeting, and I will go to Mr. Radikoff for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. The International Coalition Against Illicit Economies released a report a few months ago regarding the extent that organized crime, terrorist regimes, and foreign agents have infiltrated our country from places like Mexico, Iran, and China. One of the authors was Calvin Krusty, the former senior officer of the RCMP, and his conclusion is that since 2015, when the Liberal government took charge, these criminal networks have taken over the country. Officers are powerless to stop them due to weak-kneed catch-and-release policies of the NDP Liberal criminal justice system. To Mr. Burchell, would you agree that Mexican cartels, Chinese triads, and Iranian-backed organized crime networks are flourishing in Canada right now?
Assistant Commissioner Burchell, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the question. I guess in response to the question, what I would say is, as the National Police Force, the federal policing border integrity program relies heavily on domestic and international partnerships to detect, deter, and investigate organized crime. I certainly am not in a position to speak to the author's conclusions that he's documented. What I can say is that we use all of our resources within the RCMP and our integrated efforts with partners to try to attack organized crime, and we investigate it where it shows up.
So would you not say that organized crime is increasing in Canada compared to, say, 2015?
I certainly can't speak to whether it's increased or decreased since 2015. All I can say is that we currently have a position where we're fighting it with everything that we can, and I can say that our international and domestic partnerships and kind of the multi-layered approach that we have to the border, the Federal Policing Border Integrity Program is very good at identifying organized crime and investigating it where it's detected.
The Commissioner of the RCMP, Michael Duhame, appeared at this committee when we were talking about Roxham Road. He painted a picture of a police department that was stretched quite thin. I had asked him a question, which I asked him, if Roxham Road weren't a priority at that time, would it be better for the overall crime rate in Quebec and in Canada? And his response was that you would redistribute the resources within the other units that we have in the province: serious and organized crime, financial crime, and national security. So national security and organized crime mean fighting international cartels and drug traffickers and human trafficking, right? So from your perspective, do you agree with your commissioner that the Prime Minister hamstrung your ability to fight organized crime and these cartels of human traffickers in Quebec?
Assistant Commissioner.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I would agree with the Commissioner about the reallocation of resources for certain. Roxham Road was one particular point where we amalgamated a lot of resources. Some of those resources were already dedicated to the Federal Policing Border Program. Some of those resources were pulled from other federal policing units to assist because of the volume and the work that was required to do that. When the volume of migrants started to slow down at the Roxham Road, and we redistributed our resources, some of those were just redistributed back to their border integrity positions, but some of them went back to their substantive units, which would have been national security, financial crime, serious and organized crime. So I would agree with them that is what happened when Roxham Road closed.
So according to Stats Canada, in 2015, there were just over 300 cases of human trafficking investigated under the authorities of Immigration and Refugee Protection Act and the Criminal Code. But it's increased to 550 in 2019, actually, and it's continued to be high. So it's almost a doubling of cases as the Liberal government lessened prison time. International organization criminals are becoming more emboldened. And so can you not see that as the Liberals have implemented these soft-on-crime house arrest, these kinds of things. Can you not see that there is a correlation between those policies and the rise of human trafficking in Canada? Or are you just saying that that's not the case at all?
Assistant Commissioner.
Thank you for the question. I guess I wouldn't be able to comment on the numbers of cases because I wouldn't be tracking, or we wouldn't be as an organization necessarily tracking stats of the cases. We would be dealing with the investigations that we're presented with.
So you're telling me that within the RCMP there's no tracking of statistics, that you don't know if crime is going up or down or sideways? You're telling me that you're flying blind on these things?
Assistant Commissioner.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say that. For point of clarity, I guess what I would say is that federal policing, border integrity, because of our mandate at the border,
okay.
And
we've gone down this road before. So you just told me that you didn't know if things have increased, and now you just said there are stats. So what is it? Or do you know or do you not know? I'm confused.
Assistant Commissioner.
yes, if I could have an opportunity to answer the question, where I was going with the federal policing mandate was that when we do get referrals, as my colleague from CBSA said, on human trafficking cases in the federal program, we do those investigations. However, because human trafficking cases are primarily a police of jurisdiction file and investigation that gets done in other parts of Canada, where we're police of jurisdiction as well, but where there's other police of jurisdiction, the carriage of our human trafficking program falls under the contract and Indigenous policing program. So I could certainly commit to come back to the committee with statistics that we have on human trafficking cases from both programs. I guess what I was trying to say today is not that we don't have stats, just that I wouldn't be tracking stats for the purposes of responding to this committee.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member.
If we could provide those stats to the committee, that would be good.
Sure, that's it. Good. Thank you, and we will go to Parliamentary Secretary, Mr. Chang. Go ahead for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. One of IRCC's responsibility when it comes to human smuggling is to detect and correct misinformation regarding Canada's asylum and immigration programs. What kind of misinformation are we seeing, and can you expand on the work that is being done to correct it?
Who is the question?
IRCC.
IRCC, Mr. Harris, and go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. IRCC is working closely with our partners in the international protection space to ensure that we are working not only through their networks to contact individuals that are at risk of potentially requiring protection and or asylum, to ensure that they have access to information about that. We push that information out on our websites. We also have campaigns in regions where we see people may be vulnerable to those activities. A good example actually is a measure that our mission in Mexico has recently put in place called Checa to Visa, which allows people to have documents that they may be provided by individuals who are malicious actors offering bad information or false permits to them, so that they can check with our officials to make sure that the documents they've been provided or the promises that have been made to them are legitimate and accurate.
Thank you for that answer. Then when the minister was here, we heard him talk about the global migration crisis we are seeing across the world. As he said, Canada is not the only country facing this crisis, but we must continue supporting asylum seekers. Can you expand on the program that IRCC had put in place to help asylum seekers?
Well, thank you very much. A couple of the things that I would highlight there just quickly. One, we are making significant engagements internationally to address the conditions that lead people to seek asylum. So, in December, Minister Miller announced a $75 million investment into programming elsewhere in the world, particularly in Latin America, to deal with some of the conditions and factors that are in place in those countries to support people. Obviously, here in Canada, when people do claim asylum, we have measures in place, and we work closely with our provinces and territories to ensure, as been already mentioned at the committee, housing supports are in place, other supports are in place. We've expedited processing on work permits with respect to another question to ensure that people can be settled as quickly as possible, as safely as possible, while their claims are being considered.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does IRCC have a role in going to other countries to speak about the migration or asylum seekers issue, or do we just do it locally in Canada?
Well, we have a we have a mission footprint around the world. So our staff are present in many missions across the world and actively engage with local officials, with local NGOs and partners, and directly with the community to ensure that good information is made available to them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We also heard the minister discuss the open work permit and vulnerable workers, which helps workers on employer-specific work permits experiencing abuse from their employers. Could you expand on the program and how it has helped temporary foreign workers, and in what ways can the program be improved further?
Thank you. So the open work permit for vulnerable workers or exploited workers is open to people who have a current valid work permit and who have experienced abuse, and they are able to come forward either directly or through migrant support agencies, which are also supported through our colleagues at ESDC to ensure that people have access to supports outside of their employer. And they come forward and their claims are assessed, and based on once they're approved, they will be offered an open work permit that can be extended for up to 3 years.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In his opening remark, the minister also stated that police investigation and prosecution can take time. While immigration officers are able to provide immediate support if they believe someone is a victim of smuggling or human trafficking, can you expand on these supports that you provide the victims?
Thank you. Yeah, similar to what I've just responded, the IRCC role within both of the strategies on human trafficking and the strategy on human smuggling is around providing immigration protection. So ensuring that people have an opportunity to regularize their status so they're not out of status in Canada, are able to work, are able to access supports in place. In addition, some of the programs also offer access to the interim federal health program so that people have access to health care, resources, and in the case of the open work permit, we also waive fees associated with applying.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could the official from IRCC, CBSA, and RCMP please explain the difference between human trafficking and human smuggling, and the role that your department plays in combating human trafficking and human smuggling?
Director General Anson, we'll start with you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, to begin with, to distinguish between the two, the simplest terms would be one is willing and one is unwitting. So in the case of the lesser severe human smuggling, human smuggling pertains to the organized movement or irregular illicit migration of individuals across international boundaries or borders. And so in many cases, if somebody is being smuggled, they are doing so willingly and have secured the support of somebody to allow for the facilitation across the border. In the instance of human trafficking, there is an exploitative nature to it, and in those circumstances, people are being coerced, and quite often are being robbed of their dignity, their freedom, and in many cases, their humanity. So trafficking is a much more severe and serious crime, and again, to focus on that one, that is something that we work significantly with partners, both for leads and recommendations and for information guidance and patterns from IRCC, but also we work in concert with the RCMP in ensuring that we have a joint investigative mandate at the border. So that's human trafficking in general. Specific to what we are doing and in the employment of our mandate, just cognizant of time, I'd maybe focus on a couple layers. There's what we do extraterritorially in identifying threats abroad, what we do in terms of applying border security measures to ensure that threats are identified, leads are provided, and referrals are made potentially where there's instances of suspected human trafficking or smuggling. And then we have domestically and inland a variety of different inland enforcement officers and criminal investigations partners that do their work in surfacing both evidence of human smuggling, where we go after the traffickers or the people that are smuggling, organized criminality, and then also the traffickers where we
Thank you very much. We'll go to Mr. Bruno Duceppe for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Chair. I was listening to you, Mr. Anson. I think these people are exploiting other people's misery. I worked in the field of cinema. There was a film entitled Human Trafficking. It was extraordinarily moving. You talked about enquête, or the investigation on TV, or rather, how many investigations are underway right now to deal with these smugglers? How many investigations are underway to try to deal with these smugglers at our borders? Thank you for your question.
We have 27 current active cases. What's important to mention there as well is that, again, cases can last multiple years due to witness availability, the ability to compel testimony, and again, the complexity and sophistication for which to augment that figure. I would refer to the RCMP in supporting what is likely the larger amount of investigations. Specific to human smuggling, we currently have 171 active cases, again, going back approximately 3 years. And in those circumstances, what we also try to do is ensure not only that we are going after the organizers and the organized criminality or the more facilitative role behind that, the people that are organizing large amounts of people that are being exploited typically after the border. But we're also working, again, in concert with our partners, where in some circumstances we might be the lead or there might be a joint investigative lead, or we might also defer to the RCMP based on what we would perceive to be an ability to focus with greater sophistication on more complex cases.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Est-ce que vous diriez, parce qu'il y a beaucoup de gens qui nous disent ça.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard from experts that it's easier for the police in the United States because they have certain legislation. It's easier for them to go forward with accusations of smuggling and human trafficking. Is it easier for the American authorities to deal with this? Easier for them than for us?
Merci encore pour la question. I would not be, I'm not qualified to make a comparison between the two criminal justice systems. But I would say is, IRPA, our own legislation and criminal code do afford the right types of tools that we employ to the extent possible. But again, I wouldn't be qualified to make a direct comparison. Apologies.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Écoutez,
Thank you, Chair. Now, there was a program on Radio-Canada, it has been mentioned. In November 2023, they said that these officers at the borders, when they're trying to deal with human trafficking, and we heard in particular from a Mr. François Paquet, who said there was a rented car from Toronto with all kinds of people who came to Canada at Vancouver and then went to the American border, and they seemed to have no links with the other passengers, and the police had to let them go without being able to search their car because they had committed no illegal act. What's sad here is that these people were stopped the next day after they crossed the border on feet, and they had quite a sum of money. Now, is it a fact that many officers or agents are involved in this but couldn't do anything? These officers know what's happening, but they can't, with all the goodwill in the world, do anything about it because of our legislation.
Yes. Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. No, well, I guess what I would say is it's very difficult for me to comment on exactly what the circumstances were of the investigation at that time in that particular instance. But I know that our officers and when we get integrated intelligence from our U.S. partners, particularly at the border in these sorts of cases, we don't catch all the trafficking and smuggling that comes across, but from time to time we get intelligence that we can act on. These investigations are complex because of the nature of them, and sometimes there isn't evidence available that affords us. At the end of the day, within Canada, we have to work within the statutory and legislative framework that we have. So sometimes there's not the ability for them to pursue an investigation, but we do have instances where we do, and we are able to arrest that driver.
Merci, monsieur, parce que c'est quand même un agent qui veut faire son travail, qui est au courant.
Well, you have an officer who wants to do his job. He knows what's happening, but can't intervene. Where there were these two people who were exploiting others for money, exploiting these poor people. And someone, now this officer actually talked to a journalist because he was just sick and tired of what was going on. Now, there are some rumors, and you perhaps could confirm this. Mr. Burchill said that recently there have been cuts to Division C, which patrols the border at Quebec. Now, have you heard about these cuts in manpower, that people are going to be let go? Or can you tell us that this is not going to happen, that there won't be cuts to the number of officers at the border between Quebec and the United States?
Please.
Yes, thank you for the question. And I have no information that suggests to me that we're cutting any positions at the border. The border program, as I said before, because we had a more critical mass of officers that we'd reallocated from other units at Roxham Road, that does not mean that we're taking any resources away from the federal policing border program. So I'm not aware of any cuts to our program or that we would be removing resources on looking at border security.
Madam Kwan. Madam Kwan, 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you again to the officials for being here today. I think as we're sort of talking about data, it would be really good to have data that compares apples to apples in this sense and over a longer period, because we just heard allegations, for example, about certain periods of time, certain things have escalated and so on. So for my first question, what I'd be interested in getting for the committee is a breakdown of the staffing level, both from the RCMP as well as CBSA officers over different periods. And so that would be for the period of the previous administration, over that 10-year period under the Harper administration, separated out for that period how many staff RCMP officers were there, versus as well as CBSA officers during that period, and breaking it down year by year, along with the budget, because I think budgetary constraints also have implications as well. And I fully understand that sometimes within the departments, certain urgent things come up and you redeploy, right? But if you've lost budgets as well as staffing, you're kind of just sort of plugging a hole over here with something else. So getting that data, I think, would be really useful if we can get that data for that period, as well as the period since 2015 to now. Is that possible? That's something you can table for the committee, breaking it down year by year, both on the staffing level as well as the budget level for both the RCMP and for CBSA.
I will go to Assistant Commissioner first and then to Director General. Please go ahead, Assistant Commissioner.
Yes, thank you for that, Mr. Chair. And I will endeavor to go back to the RCMP and ask about that data. I know we have data. I know there's data that we can track, and I'll see what we can do about how we break that budget down in federal policing as it pertains to positions looking at border integrity.
Thank you.
I'll commit to go back with that.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Director General, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I'm confident we'll either have the information or we'll do our best to surface as much info fidelity as possible on the number of employees and certainly the budget year over year for that 10-year period.
Thank you. Honourable Member.
That 10-year period as well as the current period from 2015 on. Right. Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I appreciate it's a lot of work, but I think it's important to get the data on the table. Related to the data, we talk about cases, right? It's how many active cases you have and so on. It'd be really important as well to over those two segments of periods to see how many cases were under investigation over those different periods, and then when the investigation actually started. As you've indicated, some of those cases, the investigation started 3 or 4 years or whatever ago, so then it's not an accurate presentation, because if you started 3 or 4 years ago versus what it is today, is a differential in terms of those numbers. Will we be able to get that breakdown as well?
Assistant Commissioner.
Yeah, again, I'll certainly commit to go back and endeavor to get that breakdown for you. And are you talking specifically human trafficking cases or human trafficking and human smuggling? Both.
Mr. Hanson, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, of course, the CBSA will do its best to get any and all information related to the number of investigations, prosecutions, et cetera, over that time period. What I would just suggest for awareness to the committee is that it is very complex, particularly manually intensive, and due to changing circumstances with a case or a criminal investigation or an immigration or IRPA-related investigation, not all of the cases will go through to the end. So the statistics aren't going to be as finite as I'm sure the committee would want, Mr. Chair. In many cases, perhaps the person that is the victim or the smuggler might leave, or there might be extraterritorial charges that were not brought before the Crown because there was no probability of successful prosecution. So what I would say is that given the multi-year and the manual and complex nature of aggregating data of that nature, there will be a certain amount of, I would say, reduced fidelity to the information. Again, we'll do our best. But again, similar to victims as opposed to offenders in crimes, a lot of these are called information and data that we may not be able to actually pull from systems that are used to accurately track all these important features and events.
I really appreciate that answer, because you're exactly correct to say it is very complex and there are a number of different factors that play into it. And so simplistic conclusions are exactly just that, simplistic conclusions that may well be meaningless. And so I'm trying to get at the truth as opposed to disinformation. And so what would be very useful as you gather this data, it would be really good to footnote as well the complexity of the issues and why there might be variances. Because we're trying to, at least I'm trying to do this at this committee, to get at the truth and figure out what is the best option and what government needs to do to best support you in your effort in addressing these issues, and not just use sound bites and disinformation to think that somehow addresses the issue. Because I think that does a disservice both to you as people who serve our country, as well as to the public who rely on elected officials to do a better job in getting at the issue at hand. So I really appreciate your answer. Thank you so much for that.
12 seconds left.
Well, okay, with 12 seconds, is there anything else that you might like to add that you want to bring to our attention that we should focus our minds to?
Thank you. The time is up. So brief? No? Okay, thank you. And Mr. Burchett, you want to say something? No? Okay, good. Thank you. And we'll go to Mr. Kimmich. Mr. Kimmich, go ahead for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So to go back to the Canada to lift visa requirements for Mexico press release of June 28, 2016. So it's on the Prime Minister's website. It's still there. It says, while preventing any increase in asylum claims or other irregular migration, officials plan to meet regularly to promote these mutual interests. So my questions will be to the IRCC. The rest of you two gentlemen, relax. I'll have questions maybe for you in a moment. The Minister was incapable of answering the question of what programs or public policies or internal departmental things were going on to try and keep the numbers down. It's a 2,000% increase. So what are the programs? What was done in 2016 when the visa requirement was lifted that the Minister couldn't answer?
Associate Deputy Minister, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We have had for a number of years now high-level dialogue occurring between the two countries that specifically speaks to both the number and the trends that we are seeing in this space in terms of asylum claims, human trafficking, others, to look at measures that can be taken. Some of those measures have included having discussions about strengthening awareness of rights and looking at educational campaigns. There are a number of things in the public law enforcement space that I wouldn't want to publicly disclose, obviously, because it might eliminate the tools available to people. That said, you've pointed out that the number of asylum claims has continued to increase, and we're seized with that, and we are continuing that dialogue. And I can tell you, I met recently, as recently as 2 weeks ago, with officials in Mexico City to discuss this.
Okay, so you're saying high-level dialogue. So yourself, you've met with your Mexican counterparts?
I met with them as recently as 2 weeks ago. 2
weeks ago? Okay, and how often would you say that senior officials at IRCC are meeting with the Mexican government?
Sorry. Thank you. The meetings vary over time in terms of the frequency, but more recently we've been meeting frequently. So my follow-up meeting in January was preceded by one in December, and there have been obviously, in addition, we obviously don't always meet in person. We have virtual contacts with governments at a number of levels.
Is it fair to say that you're the lead on the file then?
We have a number of people that are working on the lead. We have an ADM. Actually, we've recently gone through reorganization at IRCC, and we actually created an ADM of migration integrity, Aisha Zafar, whose role is to augment and elevate our ability to deal with integrity issues in the broader system, not just on this issue, but in the broader system.
Is that ADM then the person who is the lead on whether to reimpose or not the visa requirement on Mexican nationals?
I would. Thank you. I would say that it's a shared lead within the department. Obviously, we have policy considerations as well as integrity issues, and so she is currently leading the discussions.
So can I ask you, are you getting pressure from the Mexican government not to reimpose the visa?
Yeah, at an officials level, I would say we've maintained a good dialogue with our Mexican officials. We rely on them for a number of our programs. I would say they have expressed concerns, if that's your question, obviously around modifying the current structure around travel between our two countries. We are very reliant on mutual travel between the two countries, and that has been flagged. That said, we continue to raise our integrity concerns, and we will continue to do so.
So by the minister's own accounting of the numbers, because I only have the numbers going up to September, none of the rest of them are posted on the IRB's website. By his own account, 70% were refused after they made their asylum claim. So they were rejected by the tribunal. Are you tracking these people, and what is happening with them? And I'm going to go to CBSA in a moment to ask for the tracking.
Associate Deputy Minister. Then I'll go to the Director General.
Yeah, that is the right order of things, I would say, to go to CBSA next, as you know. Once a claim is not approved, then it moves into the removal process, and that triggers CBSA processes that start the process for removals.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, that effectively answers it. Once the...
Just a minute. The mic for Director General. Okay, go ahead, please.
Once the IRB process is done and any potential appeals have been exhausted, then it is placed into the CBSA hands for enforcement and potentially a removal order for the individual.
So how many are in that queue who are Mexican nationals or have Mexican national documents?
I don't, apologies, Mr. Chair, I don't have the statistic on the amount of Mexican nationals in the removal order list. Yes.
I'd like to ask you a final question, sir. When did the CBSA realize that there was a huge problem with the number of asylum claimants from a specific country, Mexico, making claims and then being rejected? Like, when was that flagged up to like the DM level and the ministerial level?
Brief answer. The CBSA manages a variety of different threats that continue to evolve and shift based on global migration patterns. And we always do our best to inform senior officials of intelligence or patterns, migration patterns as they evolve, and based on countries of origin that are usually due to geopolitical events out of our control.
Thank you. We go to Madam Zahid for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is for the IRCC officials. As we all know, the path of migration is not an easy one. It's like a long and difficult, dangerous and expensive. So could you please talk about what actually is driving these people to take the decision to undergo these journeys and all the risks which they entail in that process of migration?
So you're talking, I think, specifically about migration for protection purposes or humanitarian purposes, as opposed to people who may be moving.
Factors which are like driving them to take all those journeys.
Yeah. Yeah, so as the minister mentioned, there's estimates from the UN are that there's about 110 million people in the world that are currently displaced or on the move as a result of changing circumstances. The reasons for that would vary incredibly from exposure to violent circumstances, wars, or criminal elements in their country that threaten people's circumstances. Declining economic situations in various countries drive people into poverty and lack of security. We are aware of increasing challenges around parts of the world that are becoming unlivable and driving people off of where they have lived historically. So the variables are quite considerable that would lead to people that require protection.
Thank you. Although providing aid, Canada's aid and development programs, they all fall under another department and minister. But would you be able to touch on how working to improve the conditions in their home countries can lessen the demand for outward bound migration. So like making sure that like they don't have to migrate.
Yeah, so we do work with our international partners and make investments in that international space to address sort of country stability and work with the appropriate partners to help ensure that that occurs, as well as to promote human rights around the world. You know, the individual measures would vary, obviously, by region, by country that occur. Currently, as I mentioned earlier, the minister made an announcement of $75 million for this work to occur. But in addition to that, obviously, our partners in Global Affairs Canada make numerous investments into international spheres to try and support countries to become more stable.
Thank you. Given our geography, and Canada has had to deal with didn't have to deal with the same levels of migration as many countries in Europe, for example. So are there any lessons we can take from the European experience with high levels of migration? The lessons which we should adopt as we go through this process, or like some examples where we can avoid, which we can avoid?
Yeah, we're robustly engaging with our counterparts whether it's in Europe or whether it's in the US, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, to look at the different models that people have in place to address the flows of migrants around the world. And we will continue to maintain an open dialogue to learn from one another. Canada is actually often looked to as a leader in this space, and people seek our advice, but we need to be open to considering the views of others. Obviously, there's some measures that we would not be interested in taking, would not be consistent with our framework, but it's important for us to remain in dialogue with the global movement here.
Can you give some examples, like from any country you have been in touch, like some examples which we should avoid, or some examples where we can take some lessons, make our programs better?
Yeah, I'm reluctant to comment negatively on another country's measures, given their circumstances are different than our own. But I will say that we are looking to our partners in an interesting example of where we're learning from people is actually Mexico. As much as we're talking about the flows from Mexico to Canada, Mexico in the last number of years has grown to be one of the larger asylum receiving countries in the world. They have numbers of asylum claimants that mirror Canada's, and they've developed some interesting measures around economic mobility within the country to support people who seek asylum there to find meaningful employment quickly. So those kind of measures we do pay attention to, and we want to learn from.
Thank you. I think my time is up. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Mr. Brunet for 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to put the same question to each of you, and you can answer yes or no quite easily. So I just have 2.5 minutes. That's why I'm doing this. Is there, within your various agencies, are there any analyses that say that Mexican cartels at the borders are exploiting the fact that Mexican nationals don't need visas to enter Canada? It's quite easy, so yes or no, please.
Mr. Hanson, would you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't, unfortunately, have a yes or no answer. I would say that in terms of organized criminality exploiting visa-free travel, I mean, that is something that seldom surfaces in evidence related to prosecutions or inland investigations related to IRPA. I would say that it is something that theoretically we do know exists. Visa-free travel is exploited in all circumstances, and there are always criminals and organized crime groups that are typically involved or associated with those types of illicit movements.
Monsieur Burchell, est-ce que vous avez été mis au fait dans des notes?
Mr. Burchell, have you had any internal information that these people were exploiting the fact that they don't need a visa?
Merci pour Monsieur le commissaire adjoint. Non, pas de renseignements internes qui indiquent qu'on exploite une situation en particulier. Je répéterai ce qu'a dit mon collègue de l'ASFC.
We have issue with the interpretation, is it? You okay? Go ahead, please. Go ahead, Mr. Burchell.
Just underline the fact that organized crime will, find vulnerable folks and exploit them, regardless of the circumstances around that.
Donc si on fait une recherche de demande d'information.
So if we had an information request, there would be no internal notes or information saying that Mexican cartels are using this breach, which is the non-necessity of visas.
Associate Deputy Minister, brief answer, please.
Very briefly, I would say there's nothing specific that I'm aware of on the Mexican cartels, but we have obviously materials on organized crime and the activities.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Madam Kwan for 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. I think precisely the issue around the visa, having a requiring a visa or not, does not facilitate, I don't think, human trafficking or organized crime. So this is what I'm hearing from you. On the question around the issue around investigations, I'm wondering how many of the active cases are jointly investigated by both, for example, the United States and Canada?
Go ahead, Assistant Commissioner, please.
Yes, thank you for the question. I couldn't, unfortunately, I'm not able to give you a number of investigations that are jointly investigated, but I can say that a large amount of our human smuggling investigations that have to do with border security are jointly investigated. We have integrated teams with our Americans on the intelligence side as well as the operational side at marine, land, and airports.
In order to help you better do your work, to address this situation, what sort of action do you need for the government to take, both from CBSA as well from the RCMP's perspective?
Mr. Anson, or you, and then to Mr. Butcher.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. And I'm not qualified necessarily to speak to what the next iteration of investments might be. Again, we can describe the policies and the programs that we implement. I can, in certain circumstances internally, can certainly recommend different types of advancements, but I would not be qualified. I'm certainly not prepared to recommend what some of the future investments might be for government.
Assistant Commissioner, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you for the question. I would say that the RCMP is always going to be accepting of any resources, financial or human, that come our way to better attack this particular problem in all the integrated ways that we're doing with partners.
Can I just say quickly, if not in resources, even in any policy change or any enhancement that will better enable you to do your work more effectively, because at the end of the day, what we want to do is to tackle human trafficking and smuggling. So what do we need to do as parliamentarians to say this should be something that the government should look at? I'm not trying to get you into trouble. I'm just trying to figure out what it is that we can do to help you to do your job more effectively. Can you table that information to the committee, please?
Time is up, and just a quick answer, please. If someone want to say, otherwise I'll move to Mr. Reddycop. Mr. Butcher.
Yes.
Sorry, can I just ask for them to table the information to the committee?
Okay, thank you, and we'll go to Mr. Reddycop. Mr. Reddycop.
Okay.
Mr. Butcher.
Yeah, just quickly, in the interest of time, as I said to the other member that asked a question, we work within the legislative framework that we have. So it's not that we've turned our mind to what needs to be done differently necessarily, but I can certainly take the question back and do some analysis at RCMP and see if there's a different response.
Thank you, and we're over time, and Mr. Reddycop will go 2 minutes to you, and then we'll go to Mr. Ali to finish off. Mr. Reddycop, go ahead, please.
Thank you. So back to this letter from 2016. You answered the question about meetings with Mexico, but you didn't really answer the question about the way to prevent the increase in asylum claims and what procedures, processes, strategies, documents, et cetera. And if I understand what you said to Mr. Brunel de Sepp, you said there was nothing there. Is that a fair assessment? There were no concrete plans to maintain asylum claims at that level back in 2016?
Assistant Deputy Minister, Associate Deputy Minister, go ahead, please.
Thanks. No, I think the question from Mr. Brunel-Duceppe was around whether we had specific briefing notes about the cartel and its role in terms of things. That was a very different question than the question of are we doing anything or what are the measures in place to begin to address some of these issues, just to be clear.
To the CBSA, when you detain violent criminals, the provincial jails aren't allowing you to put them in there generally anymore, and you have your own jails for human traffickers, violent offenders, etc. So essentially, though, if there's no room for them, if there's nowhere for them to go, they get released into the Canadian population. Is that a fair statement? And do you believe that releasing these criminals into Canadian society is a good thing?
Director General, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, that's not the area within which I work. So I do understand that it's an area that is also in transition, but unfortunately, I'm not able to accurately answer the question. I mean, we can certainly commit to a response as required, but unfortunately, I'm not prepared to answer that one.
Can you provide that information to the committee?
I can certainly endeavor to do my best, for sure. I'll take that question back.
The Auditor General confirmed that CBSA had almost 35,000 people listed as wanted, people that you wanted to remove but could not find. Of those, 2,800 were wanted criminals, the information that I have. And as of today, how many people have received removal notices that you have lost track of?
General, brief answer, time is up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, unfortunately, that's not the area within which I currently work. So it's something I can certainly take back as a question to the CBSA, but unfortunately, I don't have those figures with me today.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Ali for 2 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair.
They will provide that information. Yeah, thank you. He said it. Mr. Ali, for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair, I'd like to, first of all, thank IRCC for dealing with the heavy load and the CBSA and RCMP for keeping our border safe and Canadians safe. Thank you so much for your hard work. My question to IRCC, there are ways that we can improve our immigration system, and we should look to other countries for positive policies and measures that we can implement here in Canada. Has IRCC studied the measures put in place in other countries with regards to undocumented individuals? Can you compare our system to those of other countries?
Associate Deputy Minister, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and I may turn to my colleague who is responsible in many of these areas, but I will say we generally learn from all countries, and the Minister's already indicated his commitment to bring something to Cabinet later this year in the undocumented space. That would take into account those experiences, but I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we are looking at regularization initiatives that have been undertaken in other countries. Recently, there were some in Italy and Ireland and other countries, so we're looking at all of those. I'd say right now the main differences is that those regularization initiatives tend to be at the temporary resident stage rather than permanent resident stage, and that is something that we've heard very clearly from stakeholders, that it is something that they want to see as a permanent residency regularization initiative.
10 seconds.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask if you are looking into CBSA and the RCMP, the similar things.
Go ahead, please.
Well, we work also with IRCC just to ensure that our border security, both facilitation and security measure postures, correspond to any changes in policy as required. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Ali, your time is up. On behalf of the committee members, I would like to thank Associate Deputy Minister Harris, Assistant Deputy Minister Kingsley, Director General Hanson, and Assistant Commissioner Mr. Burchell. Thank you for being with us and appreciate your time. Before I adjourn, I'll let you go, and before I adjourn the meeting, I want to remind all members that the clerk distributed a calendar with activities for February and March. He has advised me that he did not receive any comments from members, so we will follow the calendar. On Monday, we will begin in camera for drafting instructions for a letter to Minister regarding the government's response to final report of Special Committee on Afghanistan. If we have time, we will also discuss committee business. The notice will be published later today. On Wednesday, February 14th, I have asked the clerk to re-invite officials from IRCC and CBSA for the first hour to begin the study of persons with temporary status and undocumented individuals. The clerk will also invite witnesses for the second hour. So is the committee in agreement to adjourn? Mr. Radikoff.
Just real quick, on the Monday meeting when we have the second hour of committee business, we would want that to be in public.
Chair.
Madam Jai.
Committee business cannot be in public, or it can be in.
The drafting is not going to be in the other committee business can be in the
Committee business can be in the
public. Okay, thank you. And with this meeting adjourned. Sorry.
Mr. Chair, not the drafting instructions. That cannot be on the public record. No. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
We need a break of